You're listening to the Legal Talk Network.
Hello, I'm Monica Bay.
And I'm Bob Ambrogi.
We've been writing about law and technology for more than 30 years.
That's right. During that time, we've witnessed many changes and innovations.
Technology is improving the practice of law, helping lawyers deliver their services faster and cheaper,
which benefits not only lawyers and their clients, but everyone.
And moves us closer to the goal of access to justice for all.
Tune in every month as we explore new legal technology and the people behind the tech.
Here on Law Technology Now.
Hi, and welcome to Law Technology Now. This is Bob Ambrogi. And today I'm going to be talking with Larry Port. Larry is the CEO and founding partner of Rocket Matter, a law practice management application. What do you call it, Larry? Do you call it an application? Do you call it software?
I call it software. I like to call it a solution, but Monica Bay hates the word solution, so I have to call it software.
I'm with Monica on that. I actually looked at your LinkedIn profile and you call it an application there.
Yeah, but it solves a problem. So isn't it a solution if it solves a problem?
Well, we can take that up with Monica, who is, of course, the co-host of this podcast, but she's not here today.
Haha, so we can change everything since she's not here.
We can call it a solution for today and let Monica come back at us later.
Perfect.
So I want to talk a little bit about the history of Rocket Matter. But first, what were you before you were a CEO of a legal software company?
Well, Bob, that's a great question.
I think it's a brilliant question.
It's a very good question. Actually, I had no interest in being involved in software when I was in high school. When I was I'm going way back now at this point, but I was in the school play. I was editor of the school newspaper. I wanted to be like a comedy writer for, TV or the movies. I don't know. I think all I knew is I was very creative and I was very technical. I was actually very technical. So good at math and all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't sure, maybe architecture would have been a good thing, but film seemed to call me because, it's creative and technical. So I went to Northwestern. I got a degree in radio, television, and film. Didn't really like it. I would go to these parties that, for the Academy Awards where all the students, the film students would watch the Academy Awards. And that was the last thing I ever wanted to do. And everybody else there knew who all the producers were and they knew who all the non-famous people were at those things. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get creamed in this profession because it's so competitive. So I kind of, I became very interested in the documentary aspect of things. So in photography. So when I finished school, I worked as a photographer for a newspaper down in South America. And that was pretty amazing. That was an amazing experience. And
how have I never heard that before? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and I know that you have kids that travel the world and stuff too. So, but I was in Chile for a while, and that was pretty amazing because I was there within 10 years of Pinochet being transitioning to a democracy. So that was a fascinating experience. And when I was a junior in college, I spent the year in Spain. So I have a big affinity towards Latin America and Spain. And I'm not Latin American or Spanish or whatever. It's just kind of I'm from a railroad town in Pennsylvania, but I don't know how any of this happened, but it did.
But it happened. And you must be fluent in Spanish.
Sí, puedo hablar un poquito. Está bien. And I also live down in South Florida, so I'm always using it, So if we want to do a Spanish podcast for Legal Talk Network, we could do it completely in Spanish if you wanted to. It's up to you. It's
I'd
totally
have to get
your
my
choice.
son on for that because I am not fluent.
Yeah, we'll have to ask the Legal Talk Network people if they'd be interested in that. But okay, in any case, after school, photography, especially photojournalism, just was not for me because I would, what happens is that you sit around and the stuff that you cover is either way too exciting or way too boring. So for example, way too boring, you'd have to go to a press conference, right? And just take pictures of the business guys, idiots like me. Who wants to do that? But then on the way too exciting aspect of things, you'd have to go cover a riot. And I realized that at the pinnacle of my career, they would send me into war zones if I wanted to continue the photography thing. And I'm I kind of want to coach Little League and have a bookshelf with my books. And that's not what I want. So I got involved in the film business when I was in New York City, the documentary stuff. I worked for a like a IMAX museum production company in Brooklyn, and hated it. And it was just awful. There was nothing I liked about it at all, aside from the computers. And this was the late 90s, and the internet was happening. And I knew a bunch of people programming that were like liberal arts majors. So I enrolled in this course at NYU that allowed me to like take some prereqs for liberal arts undergraduates. And if I did well, then matriculate as a master's student. And so I did that. And when that happened, of course, the internet bubble burst and all the cool companies like went away, like Razorfish or Organic or whatever they were called back then. All the cool, crazy companies, they were Gesundheit.com, whatever it was, they were like out the window. I did land on my feet. I got a job at Morgan Stanley. I was doing trading software. And even though I trained with like heavy duty database and parallel computing systems because of the film and photography background, I've always been doing front end fancy development with the visuals. And it's just not by my choice. It's just the ability that I have. So that's where I always went. And they wouldn't let me stay. When my wife got pregnant, we moved to Florida. So I had to get a job at a place called Ultimate Software. And I was a software engineer there. And I just got, I had the itch. I wanted to build my own. Starting Rocket Matter at the time was really more about wanting to build the perfect software application than it was about wanting to build business, because I'm a software engineer and it's somewhat of a craftsman type thing. So that was really what I was after.
How in the world did you pick legal practice management as an area to get into?
So that's a very good question.
I'm asking. I'm 2 for 2 here.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Excellent. Bob from downtown. So I guess the way to answer that is that like, when you're a software engineer and you work for a company, you get paid once to write your software, but then the software company gets paid like thousands of times to sell the software. And when I was at Ultimate Software, which is the company that I was at Weston, Florida, they had finally become profitable. And the way they did that is because they moved from a license model to a subscription model. So, the old license model where you'd have like a huge, multi-figure sale, like a big sale versus like a steady stream of income. So I was like, well, what could we kind of maybe apply this towards? And so I was looking for opportunities, is the truth. And I just happen to have a lot of lawyer friends, and South Florida is, very much of a service economy. And they were telling me they were having trouble with their software and their automation, and it was expensive and it wasn't very good. So I don't want to name any software names and throw anybody under the bus, but this was back in 2007 when these conversations were happening. And I took a look around at the software that was out there.
You can safely throw them under the bus at this point.
Okay, sure. But, like I saw Time Matters, for example, and I saw, things like PC Law. And these were things that they solve problems, but they run on like Windows 95. I was a big Mac fan. So nothing was really available on the Mac. They were for older systems. I'm a web programmer. That's what I trained in, and that's what I'm good at. So nothing was running on the web. Nothing was running in a browser. And I was working on HR software and also financial software, like that was incredibly secure stuff. So like it didn't make any sense to me why there wasn't anything for legal. Like I thought that I must be missing something. Like I could not believe that there was no web-based software for law firms. So that's how it happened for the most part. And this was at a time where everybody was already doing online banking. This is 2007. There was, in addition to online banking, I was working on, people were trading online. Salesforce.com was already a behemoth. Like it was just, they say that the legal vertical is slow to adopt technologies. And if that's really true, and I don't know how that compares to other verticals, but if that's really true, then that's what allowed us our opening, because it was 2007 and there was no web-based software.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if all of our listeners know this, but you and Clio launched very close to each other, but you were actually the first to announce a web-based legal practice management software. I think you announced the beta of it in, 2008, if I have that right?
February 21st, 2008. That's right.
Yeah. And sometime after that, Clio came along, not long after, I think, a few weeks after, announced the beta of its. So it's interesting. You must have faced a challenge of some kind in selling lawyers on the idea of using cloud-based software.
Oh, yeah. So It's really funny that, we beat Clio to the punch, and it like endlessly needles them. So I find that that's like one of the most fun tidbits to have. But the truth of the matter is that like we had to rely on each other, Clio and Rocket Matter, as we kind of built this industry. When we first came out of the gate, there was a lot of suspicion towards the cloud. And I mean, there still is to some extent,
There still is.
But there still is a lot of suspicion, but it's kind of weird. This is something we may want to discuss later, but we're kind of at this like tipping point moment where if your client asks you where you keep your data and you say it's in the back room next to the coffee machine versus it's hosted at Amazon, then, that's starting to sound better. The cloud is starting to sound a little bit safer to people. So it's kind of interesting how that's going. But back in the day, it wasn't just the suspicion of the cloud. First of all, let me just say that there's always enough early adopters to get the ball rolling. There's enough lawyers who understand what it can do to their business, understand the risks, people who are really in the know that are willing to take the gamble on newer technologies. And we were able to get started in a large part because of the Mac community. They had no solutions and they were using our software, and they were able to run their practices on their Mac. So that was kind of like what got the ball rolling. But I had to work very closely with Jack Newton because there were ethics opinions coming up, and it wasn't just suspicion. There was a lot of stuff that was, we were changing some economics, like a lot of money, because the way that practice management software traditionally worked is that the law firms would have to spend like $20,000 up front to get servers like SQL Server and get the licenses and install it around things. And it just wasn't very good. You required consultants to help you. And a lot of the people that were fighting us the hardest and that were arguing to the state bar associations that they shouldn't be using cloud computing were the people who had an economic interest in the status quo of having the major installs. So we had to do a lot of information sharing in order to get things off the ground. And I think the fact that it would be an interesting story one day to kind of talk about how Clio and Rocket Matter got together and shaped this. And not only that, but the competition between our company and their company has been so intense that the products have become spectacular. Like, I don't know that other verticals have the benefit of having web-based software that's as robust as what Clio and Rocket Matter have.
Yeah, and I mean, the competition has gone beyond just the two of you, obviously. There are a number of players in this field. But in some ways, the Rocket Matter and Clio have kind of taken different paths since 2008, 2009. I think it was 2009 when you came out in your sort of general availability version. But one of the things is Clio has pursued outside investment. And as far as I know, you really haven't done that. Why have you decided not to pursue outside investment?
Well, that's kind of, I mean, first of all, anything I say, I don't want to come off as a knock for, anybody who decides to go the venture capital route.
No, I don't mean to position it that way at all. It's just interesting, I think, that you've evolved in very different ways. Yeah,
well, let me put it this way. So first of all, we were able to, I am very lucky that I do have friends and family that believed in me, back when the entire economy was falling apart and invested in the company, right? We did raise private capital, not that much, we've probably raised like 1/30 of what Clio has raised. But there is, to me, I listened to the VC guys, they talked to us. We had a lot of conversations with these guys. But ultimately what happens when you take money from a VC or, any kind of institutional investor is that you have to be in agreement about what your exit strategy is. Like that's what you're forming a partnership about how you're going to capitalize off your company. And right. I was never really 100% sold that that's what I wanted to do or what direction I wanted to take things. They control your company, they have you do certain things, and we have complete, absolute freedom, right? We're a profitable company. We're able to completely guide our own ship. And no one is forcing us to make any decisions that we feel may be counter to what's important to our clients. So, that frees us up to, like, if we really think that we need to be doing this, then we can go and do this. If we want to try and do this, then we can go and do this. Now, by not having the extra money, we can't market the way they can. We can't be in all the different like bar association trade shows, and, you don't have as much money to spend on pay-per-click and things like that. So, right. it forces you to grow more slowly. But that's okay with us because we grow at the pace that we can sustain. We get more customers, then we hire accordingly. And luckily it is a subscription business, so it is predictable. So to be honest, it's not that hard to run. I will say this though, like a lot of people that have looked at our company from the institutional investment side are pretty shocked at what we've been able to pull off. It's not easy to build a software as a service business without a lot of outside capital because, you have to build the subscription revenue over time. And we were just able to do it because we kept our costs very low. So it would be an interesting case study someday, I think.
Yeah, it would be. Another way that you've differed, not just from Clio, but from some other practice management platforms is, maybe this isn't exactly right, but Clio has sort of actively pursued a lot of third-party integrations. You have some third-party integrations, but you haven't really gone down that road in the way that they have. There are some other practice management platforms out there that have sort of gone the entirely opposite direction and have no third-party integrations of any kind. What's your kind of philosophy about that? What's your approach to working with third parties in order to enhance your software?
Bob, that is another great question. All right. So
flattery will get you everywhere, Larry.
Perfect. Wonderful. It actually is a pretty insightful question because that is a fundamental choice that a lot of software companies have to make is where they want to go on this thing. So first off is that we have our own API that people can program against, right? So, there's other companies like Crometa and there's a lot of private law firms that program against Rocket Matter to get like specific reports and whatever they want. So we're open to having our own platform that people can build on top of. Now, us going to other people, we choose to focus on the software that people really embrace and use all the time. So for instance, we have Outlook integrations, Google integrations, QuickBooks integrations, things like Dropbox and Box and Evernote and Fujitsu. We rolled out a really sweet integration with them that's pretty good. So, where we think that lawyers are using existing tools, we're very excited to kind of integrate with those existing tools. But in terms of like kind of a free for all integration with all sorts of different companies, the reason that we haven't pursued that is because we haven't heard the need from our attorneys. Like one of the ways that we develop software, it's pretty much a market-driven approach to delivering software. So what we do is, we have a rhythm to how we conduct our business. We have an annual planning and then we have quarterly goals and so on and so forth. But within that context, we have weekly product meetings first thing Monday morning. And we go around the table and we say, okay, what are we hearing from sales? What are we hearing from the customer support team? What are we hearing from the customer success team? The success team is different from the support team because they reach out to the existing clients and see how they're doing. So they're more proactive. And that is what formulates our roadmap. That and what we call our PAC, our Product Advisory Committee. And the Product Advisory Committee meets around once a month. We have a group of maybe 20 law firms of different sizes. We also have some consultants in there and we show them what we're designing. We hear back from them what their pain points are. So it's very much a market-driven approach to product development. And if we don't like one thing that, for example, that Clio has that we don't have is a Zapier integration. We have heard maybe in the thousands upon thousands of law firms that we have worked with, we have come across one firm that has requested a Zapier integration. So, whether or not, we're kind of staying ahead of them or not, there are certain features where we want to stay ahead of the firm. So we want to be like, this is going to be a really good option for you. We kind of did that recently, believe it or not, with our payment plans and recurring payments. Not that many people were asking for it, but it's very clear that it would be a good thing for them. So we kind of balance those things, and we just find it easier for the technology level of a lot of our clients if they don't have to configure an integration. Does that make sense? Are those good answers?
Good answer, Larry. Yeah.
I don't know if the answer was as good as the question.
So given, this has been a steadily growing area of competition for you. Even Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis have their own practice management platforms. A number of other companies out there, MyCase, Cosmo, Lex, whatever else is out there. So do you get asked why you over the other ones? And if so, what do you say? Right.
I say that I'm better looking and smarter than them, and they should. So no, to be honest, the response that I give is that, there's a couple things that differentiate Rocket Matter over the competition. Number one, we've been around longer than everybody else. I mean, by Clio, then 1 week. But there's a lot of new companies that have been around for like 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. But we've been around. We've worked with thousands of firms all over the country, all over the world. So, we've been there since the beginning. We fought all the fights. That's one thing. But to what's important to the attorneys, our time and billing and collections aspect of thing is widely regarded to be kind of best of breed in the industry. So for firms that are really trying to make their time capture more efficient, make their invoicing more efficient, and their collections better, and really boosting their revenue, that seems to be among our client base why they choose us over the competition. And it's a fickle market. A lot of the people that are using Rocket Matter have used Clio, MyCase, or other competitors in the past. So that's what we're hearing from them. The other thing is that they like the ease of use and the design of the software. And we're very lucky to be working with like amazing designers here. It's a huge thing for me. If anybody pays attention to our company or the brand of our company or anything involving that, and a lot of that descends from, the origins of Rocket Matter, my background in like film photography. And I can't execute a lot of the look and feel, but I can recognize when it's good and recognize when it's not good. So that kind of visual strength of the product has also been another differentiator. And also, I will say that the customer service that we have, if you talk to people, is really unparalleled. Kim Byron, who runs the support department, has been with me since day one. And they are just so above and beyond great in terms of dealing with customers, getting them up and running, and having them do everything that, it just makes their lives very, very easy. So I would say that it's, I would say that it's the durability of the brand. I would say it's the superiority of the time and billing. I would say that the design and ease of use and the customer service are what really make us better than the competition.
And who's your target user? Are you primarily oriented towards solo and small firms?
We focus on firms that are 30 people and below. Although we have firms that have, 60, 80 users, we have larger firms out there, but they're more the exception to the rule. We have a lot of features that focus on the solo market, like in fact, the way that we look at firms, because, the legal really puts the S into SMB, in small, medium business. So, you're talking firms that are, so many of them are solos, so many of them are twos and threes. We actually segregate our firms, the way we study them, into solos, twos and threes, and fours and above. That's how, it's like Eskimos with snow. But that's the market that we serve.
We had an interesting conversation once, and if I understood it right at the time, you talked about the fact that getting somebody to become a customer is one thing, but then getting them to actually be a user or an active user is something else. And that sometimes you have to kind of work with new customers to get them up and running on the platform. What are the challenges about getting a small law firm to really use a platform such as yours?
Well, we have a motto here, which is that if they train, they stay. And the trick is, how do you get a busy attorney who is, fighting so many fires, especially in these small firms, to be able to sit down and focus on the product? The firms that invest in training and invest in doing things will stay. If you talk to people like if you ever hear somebody from Affinity Consulting speak, like Debbie Foster or anybody like that, and they speak at all these technology shows, they'll say that you have to invest in training. And they're right, because the firms that it is really beneficial to use practice management software, whether using us or something else. It helps keep firms organized. It helps them run their businesses better, and so on and so forth. So it's really imperative that people invest some time training. Now, to that end, we have tried everything well, maybe not everything, but we've tried a lot of things, and we continue to try a lot of things to try and get people to train. So, for example, right, the first thing we did was, okay, we're going to have a daily free webinar for people to log into. In fact, it's currently going on right now. It happens like at 11 a.m. every day. So we have the daily free webinar. Then we have FAQs. So for people who like to read, I don't like to watch videos. I like to read things, right? Then we have videos for the people that like videos and hate to read things. And then we introduced gamification into the product sometime last year, where you win things based on what you do in Rocket Matter. So if you create your first matter, you get a little pretty coin. And if you create your first invoice, you create another coin. So we really try and attack it from
Did that create incentives? Were people incentivized by that?
Yeah, I haven't really seen. It's interesting. I should like circle back around and take a look at like usage on that thing. But yeah, we've heard that people really enjoy it, and it's going to help us every time. One of the other problems that we have is that, and this is something that you may experience, a lot of times when you sign up for a software or you start using software, you use the features that are available at that point in time. And then the way that software works nowadays, as we all know, is that it's a continual upgrade system. But since you had an entry point, let's say 3 years ago in a given system, you may not be following all the new updates because you're just kind of using what was available then. And you just don't want to take the time to learn anything new because who has the time to do it? So one of the problems we have is letting existing firms like know that there's new stuff there. So now we're like trying to experiment with, okay, let's pull the login page out of where it was before and let's put more information on it. Let's come up with a better system of communication with our customers. I mean, it's a constant battle to keep software user informed of like what they have available for them.
A couple of years ago, you kind of branched out into launching an internet marketing service, and then I think you kind of retired that, or it evolved into something else where you're offering marketing products on an a la carte basis. As far as I can tell, you've gotten out of that altogether. What was that experiment about, and what happened with it?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. So that's called Internet Marketing Services. Yet another good one. And here's what we were finding. We're this small, like you mentioned before, we're like this small company, didn't really have a lot of money, especially, we've been going toe to toe with a company that's like, I mean, not just Clio, but, we're going toe to toe with companies that have billions of dollars and we're doing very well. And a lot of that's because of our internet marketing capabilities. So we're like, okay, well, if we can do this very well, maybe we could offer this to attorneys. And it also happened to be, and not to throw anybody under the bus, but law firms are getting themselves involved in contracts with legal marketing companies that are like really BS and total snake oil. And in some cases, they're spending between $3,000 and $5,000 a month on these services that are really just like locking them in and extorting them. So there's some really bad stuff out there in terms of like legal internet marketing services. So we thought that we could do a much better job for a lower price point. And we were churning out really good websites, really good stuff, the typical high-end Rocket Matter design. But what we found is that while we were making a lot of money doing this, we were spending a lot of money doing it. And it was a completely different type of business. So when you're doing websites for people, you kind of need to have a different, like the software business itself, like with Rocket Matter or another application, it's almost like the pharmaceutical business. All the research and development goes into creating the first pill. And then every subsequent pill is very, very cheap. So, we put all this effort into like doing the software, but then it's like it's so easily replicable that our margins are incredibly high with Rocket Matter. But with the internet marketing service, which required so much personal attention, it was just it was just alien to us, and it was just too hard for us to run. And, it required our staff to constantly get educated on the latest trends in SEO. We had to constantly like hire to bring in more people for that thing. And also everybody's expectation is that they're going to rank on the first page of Google. And no matter how many times we kind of said, all right, well, you're in New York City and you're a DUI lawyer, or you're a family lawyer in New York City, that may not be possible. It's very hard to set expectations in the internet marketing business. So what we decided to do was we decided to take all the resources that we were plowing into that and just plow them back into Rocket Matter. And, that's kind of our ethos. We're not afraid to try stuff. And if we feel that it's not working or that we can do something better, we're not afraid to pivot away from it.
We're at a time when there are any number of legal startups. There seemed to be a real surge in the numbers of legal startups. You were a legal startup before it was cool to be a legal startup, I guess.
I guess so.
What have you learned about running a legal technology company that other entrepreneurs in this space may not know or should know?
Boy, that's a good question. Well, the one thing I would say...
Man, I'm doing so good today.
Yeah, I think, you really are. Boy, I'm like really curious for you to ask a bad question now too. All right, so... So there's a couple things in the legal vertical that are challenging, I would say. Number one is that there's a mentality of, and this is just how lawyers think, and obviously this is a generalization, but lawyers think based on precedent, so there's, you're taught to think that way, evaluate cases based on precedent, so on and so forth. So a lot of times it's hard to find people who are willing to be risk takers in the legal profession. So, you really have to focus on where, if you're starting up, you really have to focus on where those risk takers might be and what kind of people they are. Because you have to get the ball rolling somewhere, and you have to identify the people that are going to be able to do that. We did it because there was a subculture of Mac using people back in 2008 that we were able to work with. And that's what got the ball rolling for us. So that's one thing. There is, in general, kind of a sense of risk averseness. People say that it's a very hard vertical to sell into. Again, I don't know if that's true because I haven't sold to other verticals, but I have heard anecdotally that it is just a difficult sales process in general. So sales processes might take longer. Price points might have to be lower than they are in other verticals. So those are a couple things that you need to pay attention to, which means that you're going to have to do things very efficiently. You're going to have to really focus on keeping your costs down and running a very efficient business.
What should I have asked you that I didn't ask you?
I'm a big reader and I like to think about the future of stuff. And so you were talking about, let me ask you this, Bob. What books are you reading?
What am I reading?
Yeah, what books are you reading, Bob?
Actually, I just finished a book which has nothing to do with legal technology. I just finished Jeffrey Toobin's book about Patty Hearst.
Oh, yeah. What was that good?
That was excellent. It was really good. Interesting to me because I was growing up during that time. I remember that's when that was in the news, when that was a big story. And
was she kidnapped? Help us out for those of us that are younger than like 40 or something, or 50. Actually, I'm no longer younger than 40. What happened with Patty Hearst? Did she get kidnapped?
Yeah. She was kidnapped by this thing called the Symbionese Liberation Army, which was supposedly a sort of a radical leftist military group in the San Francisco area. It was really more like the gang that couldn't shoot straight. It was sort of a small group of people who really had no idea what they were doing or even why they kidnapped her, other than that she was a Hearst and had money. But the big question is, she then sort of came around to them. She participated in bank robberies with them.
Oh,
so
wow.
The real question was whether she was brainwashed or not. This is a famous case where she had F. Lee Bailey representing her when F. Lee Bailey was considered the best lawyer in the country. So really fascinating story. And he really goes into the detail of what happens while she was kidnapped. It's like a year, more than a year, that she was on the run and being chased down. They finally captured her in San Francisco, and then there was this notorious trial, and it's quite a story. So what are you reading?
Well, would you recommend the book?
I would definitely recommend the book. I found it really engrossing and really interesting. And so what are you reading, Larry?
So I finished Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is the story of him growing Nike from, I guess sometime in the 1960s up through their IPO. And it is just a wonderful book. It's hard. I was watching the national championship the other night between Clemson and Alabama, and they all had the Nike swoosh on their jerseys, and they're all wearing Nikes. And it's so hard to believe that something that big started sometime. It's just really interesting to hear the stories. And they never had any cash. It's such a great story for anybody who wants to hear that kind of stuff.
And he's an interesting guy. He traveled a lot when he was young, and it's kind of an adventurer.
That's exactly right. He, right out of school, actually, he went to Stanford to get an MBA. And then after that, he went to Japan. He went to the Himalayas. He went to all over the world. He saw the pyramids. And when he was over in Japan is when he contracted with his first factory. And what he would do is he would borrow money, buy shoes. Shoes would come over. He would sell the shoes. Then he would take those profits and more money from the bank, spend everything, get more shoes. And he kept on repeating this process. And so he never had any credit, never had any cash in the bank. It's it reminded me of reading about the American Revolution, where one false move could have ended everything. He was so close to the line. The book I'm reading right now, I'd be really interested if you were to read this and we could have a conversation about it. Maybe you already read it. It's called The Inevitable. And it's about a number of trends that are happening in society and technology that are moving forward, and how we, and they're not specific things. They're just trends overall. One of them is artificial intelligence. Another one is the prevalence of screens. And it kind of just takes these basic things that are underpinning all of our advances and kind of plays them out logically about how they'll be over time. And it's very interesting. There's some really far out ideas in this thing. In the chapter on artificial intelligence, the guy is talking about, and I think his name is something Kelly, maybe Ken Kelly, who's a Wired reporter. And he was talking about creating a taxonomy of intelligences. There's really out there stuff in there. It's just, I don't know that I agree with all of it, but it's certainly interesting stuff to meditate on and it's important for me to kind of see where things are going and to try and anticipate how things are going.
Kevin Kelly.
Is that his name, Kevin Kelly? For me, it's
Kelly,
less about so some of it's like, because of Rocket Matter and my job as the steward of a technology company, but some of it's about having children and how their lives are going to enmesh with society and what kind of jobs are even going to be available to them. So that's some of the stuff I'm looking forward to reading in 2017. More stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, Larry, I really appreciate your taking the time to be with us today and talk about Rocket Matter and books you're reading and other stuff. It's been really nice to talk with you.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. By the way, if anybody ever wants to have a conversation with me, I'm always open to talking to somebody about cool, crazy ideas. It's Larry@rocketmatter.com. I would love to talk to anybody that is listening out there and wants to have a cool conversation.
Great. You're going to be at Legal Tech New York?
I will be at Legal Tech New York. I'll be there all day on the middle day and a little bit on the night before and the morning after.
And ABA Tech Show, are you going to be there as well?
I'll be at ABA Tech Show. That's March 13th through the 15th, I believe. So, yeah.
Well, we will see you there.
We'll definitely see you there. All right.
Thanks a lot, Larry. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Bye, Bob. Thanks. It's my pleasure.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Law Technology Now. Really appreciate your listening. On behalf of Monica Bay and myself, thanks a lot for listening, and listen next time.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. Subscribe via iTunes and RSS. Find us on Twitter and Facebook, or download our free Legal Talk Network app in Google Play and iTunes. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.